And this video is going to show you the primary functions of our thesis and dissertation template. Ultimately, the template will save you a great deal of time and effort, but in order to use it effectively, you need to understand some of its basic functions. So I'm going to walk you through several of those right now. Now, the starting point for any thesis or dissertation inquiries is our basic resource site. So if you go to the graduate school's website, you can then click Continuing Students, Thesis Dissertation Guidelines, and this page will come up. It gives all kinds of information, including deadlines for each upcoming semester, so on and so forth. But right now we're going to focus on this resource right here, the Thesis or Dissertation Template. It's a Word document that contains most of the formatting you need in order to format your document correctly. Now, it's always worth carefully reading and making reference to our handbook, which is our kind of general guide. But ultimately, the thesis template is designed specifically to meet the requirements of the handbook. So I won't dwell on that now, but again, you can refer to it for further information. Another thing I want to mention before we get started is that we have a template user's guide that's an electronic resource. You can go through it, navigate through the different pages, and it will cover many of the same points I'm making in this video. So if you need to read more about this, these details, you can go to these various subsections of our template user's guide. Okay, so let's say you download the template to your computer. I've pulled up a copy right here. One suggestion I would make right from the get-go is that you save a blank copy of the template. In other words, an untouched copy that's just for reference. And the reason for that is, as you will see when you go into the text itself, beginning on page 2 in chapter 1 of the template itself also contains guidance. It also explains its own functions. And so again, if you need to see examples, if you want to copy something or paste something, if you want to just read more about how to use the template, it's worth having a spare copy of the template on hand, because of course eventually you're going to replace all of this template text with your own text. So again, keep that in mind as well. It's worth having a blank copy. Okay, but let's say you have a copy that you're going to work with. You're going to bring your material into it, and this is going to become the final formatted version of your thesis or dissertation. The first several pages are kind of self-explanatory. You simply remove these parentheses wherever they appear and type in the relevant information, your title, your name, what kind of project you're doing, what kind of degree you're doing. On the second page, you put your committee members' names, your department chairs' names, so on and so forth. And again, remember to eliminate the parentheses as well. Those are just there as placeholders. But what I really want to focus on for the purpose of this video is how to format headings, how to format figure captions, table captions. These are the main functions that can trip you up if you're not familiar with how they work within the template. So the first thing to mention is, after those preliminary pages, we already have a table of contents, a list of figures, and a list of tables set up for you. For now, we're not actually going to do anything with them. We're going to leave them as they are, and as you'll see, we'll come back to them frequently and update them. You'll notice when I click on, for instance, the table of contents, the entire table becomes shaded. That indicates that it's a field which can be updated by Microsoft Word, and you'll see very soon why that's useful. But again, just keep that in mind for now. If you right-click on it, you can update field. I'll show you how that works in just a moment. Okay, so let's say you have started writing some of your text within a separate document. Here I'm using some dummy text that actually is by Albert Einstein, so it has a kind of science theme. Let's pretend you've written a chunk of your text in a different document, and now you want to incorporate it into the template to format it properly. So first, as I said, skip over the table of contents. Don't even worry about that. Don't touch it. We'll come back to that. Go to the beginning of the text. So we have the abstract, and then chapter 1. Now, this is just the template dummy text. What I would suggest is that you leave the headings, the chapter headings, as they are. You can change the names if you need to in later chapters, but I would leave them as they are, because there's one subtle addition. If you click next to the chapter 1, chapter 2, the chapter headings, you'll see that there's a small number that's actually in white, and hence it's invisible most of the time. That's going to prove useful. So it's worth keeping these chapter headings and simply replacing the remainder of the text. So let's say I want to bring my sample chapter 1 into the template. Okay. I'm going to copy it. And what I'll do now is I'll go into the template, I'll highlight all of the chapter 1 template text, in other words, the built-in template text, and then I'll simply right-click and I'll paste. Now, it would be worth not merging if that option comes up for you, because we want to keep the formatting separate. Okay. Now, in this case, we already have a chapter heading. We also here have what we're calling a level 2 heading. I'm going to use this language throughout, and it's important that you kind of become familiar with it. We talk about level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and level 5 headings. The level 1 headings are very simple. Those are the chapter headings. The only level 1 headings in your document really are your chapter headings. A level 2 heading, the simplest way to think about it, is a heading with a 2-digit number. So if you have 1.1, 1.2, 3.2, 3.9, those are all level 2 headings. Again, you can think about it as being the 2-digit subsections. Obviously, underneath this, you could add a section like 1.1.1. You could under that have 1.1.1.1, etc. Those would be level 3, 3 digits, and level 4 headings, respectively. Now, the key thing as you go through your document, if you've brought in your own, or if you want to just manually add in your own headings, you can type in the numbers manually. You saw that Microsoft Word was trying to do it automatically. For some purposes, that could work. In some cases, however, it will actually throw things off, so I prefer to do it manually. All you have to do then is highlight your chosen level 2 heading, or whichever kind of heading it is. Highlight that text and click the heading to style. So again, this is meant to be fairly straightforward. We talked about level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. Within the template, and this is something you won't get if you open your own document and start from scratch, we have styles on the Home tab. These styles over here, and they correspond directly to those various level headings. So heading 1 corresponds to level 1 heading. See, if I click on it, this one's already formatted as heading 1. If I highlight my level 2 heading, and right now it's just normal text, it doesn't know that it's a heading, I click heading 2. Now, nothing looks different, but if you click on it, you can see the difference. So it thinks of the main body of text as being normal, and it thinks of the level 2 heading as being heading 2 style. Let's now look back at the table of contents and see why that's useful. So again, we've only changed, we brought in some text, we've changed one of the headings to level 2, simply highlighting the text and then clicking on the style. Now if you go back to the table of contents and you, as I said, right click on it, you can click Update Field. If you update field, it will automatically update the fields to include all of the headings that you've indicated. So here, so far, all we've done is we've added this level 2 heading, purpose of research, and we've eliminated the other sample headings in chapter 1. And what you'll notice is it now added it with our numbering, with our title written just as it is in the text, and it also adds the page number automatically. So these, as you can see, are major advantages. You don't have to manually come back and type in each of the elements of your table of contents and change these numbers manually. You can simply do it by updating the field. And so again, if you right click anywhere on the table of contents, update field. And sometimes it'll ask you this option. It'll say, do you want to update page numbers only, or do you want to update the entire table? Depending on what you're doing, you'll choose the appropriate option. For instance, if we want to identify new headings, we want to make sure we update the entire table. Another useful shortcut that I'll mention is that if you press F9 once you've clicked on any field within the text. So for instance, if I just click anywhere, left click on the table of contents, then click F9, the same dialog comes up. So F9 is a shortcut for update field. and that's worth keeping in mind. Okay, so chapter 1 was very simple. We pasted the text, we changed this to a proper heading 2 style, level 2 heading. Let's do something similar with the second chapter of our sample text. So again, let's say you've written your chapter 2 separately. You have a number of subsections. Maybe you even have some figures and tables. Let's look at how we handle all of those different elements. So again, I'm going to copy this text from a different document, and I'm going to replace the existing template text, which is of course just for your reference. Okay. So again, I left the level 1 chapter heading because it's a little easier that way. You can manually type it in, and then like we did with the level 2 heading, you could simply highlight it and click heading 1. But I think it'll be a little bit easier for you if you simply leave those chapter headings in since they're already prepared for you. Okay. Now we're going to start by doing the same kinds of things we did with chapter 1. So again, let's say I've identified the subsections I want to use, but they need to be sort of associated with the proper style. It's kind of like you could think of it this way. You could say Microsoft Word needs to know which text represents a heading in order to update the table of contents automatically. Right now, we as viewers can see that it's a level 2 heading, but Microsoft Word doesn't know that unless you tell it. So we're going to tell it by, again, highlighting that text, clicking on heading 2. No apparent change, but again, if you click on it, you can see that it's now identified with heading 2. Now let's look at a couple of other options, heading 3 and heading 4. Now these are a little bit different. If you look at the original template, or if you look at the handbook, and I'll show you an example in the template chapter 3, the way we recommend that you do the formatting for the level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5 headings differs. Each one has its own distinctive style. And the styles that we're using come from APA. So if you want more information about this, you can look up APA heading levels, and that will give you examples and explanations of all of this. But I'll show you a few examples right here. So obviously we understand what a level 2 heading looks like. Level 3 headings normally are going to be indented. It's simply going to be bold text, but interestingly, you have a period after the heading, and then the text, your paragraph text, begins right after the heading. So for instance, if this is the beginning of the section, you might begin writing text here. And it's like the font is too big, but that's easy enough to change. But again, the idea is that it actually flows within the paragraph. So the level 3, level 4, and level 5 headings all work this way. They all are the beginning, essentially, of the paragraph. You indent, you have the heading, and then you begin the paragraph text. Now, you'll see that the level 4 and level 5 headings have a distinctive style. So these ones are different. We have bold for heading level 3, we have bold and italics for level 4, and then we have italics not bold for level 5. And again, it's just a quick strategy to let the reader see which type of heading they're looking at. Okay, so let's go back to our text that we've inserted. So again, this is text that you took from your own separate document. You've inserted it here. Now you want to make sure you're associating your headings with the heading styles. So we did the heading 2 for 2.1. Now here we have a level 3 heading. And compared to what we just looked at, it's not formatted correctly as per APA level 3 heading style. So let's figure out how to change it so that it is proper. The first thing I would do is this. If you have it on a separate line, I would recommend you simply use backspace and bring the beginning of the paragraph up onto that same line. The next thing you do is you then simply highlight the part that is the heading. Don't highlight the text of the paragraph, but simply highlight the heading. And then click heading 3. Now again, nothing looks different, but if you click on it, that portion is heading 3, and the rest of the text in the paragraph is still normal. You can then, as we saw, simply indent it. One other subtle point that's not handled automatically that you have to be watching out for is that we prefer, and it comes from APA again, that you use a different capitalization style for level 3, level 4, and level 5 headings. And the simplest way to think about it is that, again, the heading text is actually part of the paragraph. So similar to when you're writing any sentence within a paragraph, you're only going to capitalize the major words or proper nouns, and of course the first word in the heading. So here, for instance, truth would not need to be capitalized. We would simply leave that T lowercase. Again, just like you would within the body of your paragraphs. Of course, the exceptions are when you have a proper noun. So for instance, if you're naming a person or something like that where you need to use a proper noun within the subheading, of course, you should use appropriate capitalization. But the point is, treat these level 3, level 4, and level 5 headings like they are sentence text. And in fact, we call it sentence style capitalization, as opposed to title style or title case capitalization, where you capitalize all major words, as you would do for the level 2 headings. So again, level 2 headings, title case capitalization, level 3, level 4, level 5, sentence case capitalization. And let's just do a couple more examples to see how this worked out. And I want to show you one thing that can throw you off, and that's why I did it the way I did it for the first one. So for instance, let's say here you say, okay, I have another level 3 heading. I'll highlight it. I'll click heading 3. Great. Now I'm simply going to backspace to bring the text on the same paragraph. Uh-oh. What happened? Now is you can see the entire paragraph turned bold. In fact, the entire paragraph turned to heading 3. So if you went back to the table of contents right now and you updated the field, this entire section, the entire paragraph, would appear as a heading 3, which is obviously not what you want. That's unnecessary. It's inappropriate. It doesn't fit. That's not what you want. Now the trick again is to avoid this by one of two options. One option is you can simply first keep this normal, or keep it at least not heading 3, and then backspace. And when you backspace, now the entire paragraph remains normal. Now you can highlight the part that you want to distinguish as heading 3 and click heading 3. And then again, you'll indent. You'll change it to sentence case capitalization. And there you go. And now again, this will come up in the table of contents. The rest of the paragraph will not. Let's do one more example of a level 4 heading. And again, you can see how the numbers proceed. This should be a familiar concept, but again, you want to keep track of the numbers. If you keep adding sections, you might need to change some of the subsequent numbering. It won't necessarily be handled automatically unless you've set Microsoft Word to do that for you. So for instance, if I add a new subsection here, and it was going to be the new 2.1.2, I would of course appropriately need to change this to 2.1.3. So again, as you make adjustments, make sure you do one final look through and ensure that the various subsections are numbered appropriately. Let's do one more example here of just formatting a level 4 heading. So again, let's say you make the error that I was just showing you. I'll show you how to undo it as well. Let's say, okay, now you make this a level 4 heading. Now here you can see that the formatting actually changed. The font changed to italics because for level 4 headings we have it set to do so that they're distinguished from level 3 headings. Now let's say you bring this back up like this. The entire paragraph now turns level 4. Well, even if you don't undo it, you could make the correction this way. You could get it all set up, ready to go. Now highlight the entire paragraph, click normal. And then select heading 4. So in other words, you don't have to necessarily undo it, but you can do it manually, sort of undo it manually by highlighting the entire paragraph, clicking normal. And that'll prevent any of those problems from emerging. And then again, you simply highlight the part you want and click the appropriate heading level. Okay. So now you get the basic idea here. This one's simple. Any of these level 2 headings, you click on it, and then we're going to turn to heading 2. Now we're going to move into figures and tables. But before we do that, I want to make sure you see the end result of what we've done. The reason that we've done all this kind of identifying the different headings with these styles, and again, if you click on this number, it brings up heading 5 and other various headings. So that's where heading 5 is if you didn't see it. Now we go back to the table of contents. Again, you can just click on it anywhere. You can right click, click update field, or you can click on it and push F9, which is the shortcut for update field. And if I update the field, ta-da, now we have level 2, level 3 headings, a level 4 heading, and another level 2 heading, all formatted appropriately. And you can see that they're all distinguished. So in other words, all level 2 headings line up, all level 3 headings line up, all level 4 headings line up. And this would proceed throughout the document. Now, one minor problem that can come up, and one minor issue I can see here, is that level 4 headings should also have sentence case capitalization. And perhaps many of you noticed that as you were watching the video. Another handy trick I'll show you, and there are two ways you can do this. One is if you're on the table of contents, you see if you hover, it usually will tell you you can go directly to that section. If you click, if you hold down Control and then click, it'll follow the link to that section. Another useful tool that I'll mention though is if you go to the View pane and you click on Navigation pane under Show. Usually it's under Show. If it's not there, it may be somewhere else on your version. But if you click the Navigation pane, it's a very, very useful tool because it actually allows you to see a kind of outline of your document that you can quickly scroll through. So now that we've added these subsections, it will show some of them. It'll show the level 2 subsections here. It'll have chapter 1, 1.1, chapter 2, 2.1, 2.2. And so if I simply click on that, it'll go right to that part of the text. And so especially as your text becomes longer and more complex, this is a very helpful way to quickly navigate from one section to another. I'm going to close it for now, but again, you can find it under Navigation pane under the View tab. One point I wanted to make, and I started making a moment ago, let me correct this for my own sanity. One other thing to consider is if you find out later on in the process that one or multiple of your sections, for some reason, one of your headings or several of your headings haven't shown up in the table of contents, basically what that tells you is that something in the text needs to be associated with the appropriate heading level. So for instance, let's say I skipped over one of these when I was going through the chapter. I forgot to do this. It actually stayed as normal. It looks right, but it won't show up in the table of contents because it's bold, but it's actually normal. Again, simply double check, go back through the text, find all your headings, make sure that each one is associated with the appropriate heading style. It's a fairly simple fix. And similarly, if you ever see unusual text appearing, for instance, let's say I accidentally highlight all this, and now you look at the table of contents and you see this. It says, hypothetical example, let us suppose our. You can say, well, wait a minute, that must mean something in the text is accidentally highlighted and identified with heading 3. And you can undo that by highlighting that text and clicking normal. And then if you update the table of contents again, that extra unnecessary portion would disappear. So again, whatever you see in the table of contents reflects the way that you've identified headings or text within the document itself. Okay, hopefully those examples are fairly clear. You can also, I'll just mention this, you can also copy an existing level 2 or level 3 heading. And if you paste it, it will remain level 3. So for instance here, let's say I want to just add another level 3 heading by copying and pasting. Now, as you see, if I started typing after it, the remaining text would be heading 3 as well, so I can change that to normal. And then you could simply change the text. So you could change this to 2.3 and add whatever new heading you want to add. You could do it that way, but I think it's best to kind of type them out and then click the style because it helps you kind of make sure you've done it correctly in each case. But again, that's kind of a side note. Okay, now I want to move into the next major area, which is the use of figures and tables in the document. And again, what we're going to see is that if we do this correctly, it allows us to update the list of figures and list of tables very simply, thus saving you a lot of time and a lot of energy. So let's do figures first. Now, here I copied this image directly from the other document. But if you need to add an image from some other file on your computer, you simply go to Insert, and normally the simplest way is Picture. If you insert a picture, this will allow you to insert JPEGs, it'll allow you to insert PNGs, whatever kind of file. Now JPEGs are probably preferred because they're usually the most condensed file size, But again, depending on where the image comes from, whether it's from a computing software you're using or from a website, whatever it might be, you can insert that image if you go to Insert Picture. So here, of course, we already have our picture. And in fact, we actually have our sample caption. We're going to change this so that it actually is picked up by Microsoft Word in the same way that for the headings, we needed to tell Microsoft Word which headings were which. We have to tell Microsoft Word to keep track of these captions. Otherwise, it doesn't know that this is a caption versus text that you've just typed out. Okay. Now, again, I'll show you from from chapter 3 of the original template. And again, it's why it's worth keeping a sample blank original template so you can kind of just look at these examples. You can see that what we normally suggest is that you center your figures. You can change the size as you see fit. Try to make them readable, but not excessively large or obviously not excessively small. You'll also notice that, and again, this comes from APA style, we suggest using italics for the figure and the figure number, and then the caption itself remains unitalicized. And I'll mention, as you see right here, for tables, it's actually kind of inverted and it has a different appearance as well. It's split onto two lines, but the opposite applies here. So here, table number is not italicized, and the caption itself is italicized. And again, there's some other nuances. You can see, for instance, that there's a period here after figure 3, and then there's a period at the end of the figure caption, whereas there is no such thing with the tables. Those are minor details. Ideally, you can kind of follow these rules of thumb, but as long as you have the basic style in play, that will suffice for our purposes. Also, you can notice, if you want to be really subtle, the figure captions use sentence case capitalization, and the table captions use title case capitalization. So all of the major words except for things like and, a, of are capitalized. Okay. Now let's go back to our sample here. You've inserted this figure. You know what the caption is. You're going to say this is figure 1, and its caption or its title is space-time curvature. Now again, it's up to you how you want to do this. As long as you're consistent, it's fine. Let's say you want to add a period here and a period here, and you're going to keep it sentence case capitalization. As I mentioned, the problem is Microsoft Word doesn't know yet to keep track of this. So what we're going to do is as follows. I'm actually going to delete figure 1 because we're going to insert it and it's going to appear right there for us. So if you go to references, there's an entire sort of subsection about citation and bibliographies, one about captions. If you use EndNote to do your citations, this will be associated with EndNote, and that can be very useful for many students. But for right now, I want to show you the insert caption function. This is going to be used for both figures and tables. So you simply go to References, Insert Caption, and I'm going to show you two options. Now the first option is we're not going to include the chapter number, and so it'll simply be figure 1 because the first figure we've selected from the text. And you see here it says label. You can choose figure or table, and it would know that it's table 1 or it's figure 1. Now if I simply push OK, you can see it's already got this italicized. Now it added the figure 1 caption. Now what you'll see is if you hover over, if you pass over the number is shaded, just like the table of contents was, just like the list of figures was, just like the list of tables was. Again, that tells you that this is a field that Microsoft Word is tracking. And that's going to be very important because for the figures, the numbering will be tracked by Microsoft Word. You don't actually have to worry about numbering your figures. It will do that for you if you follow this method. So again, all I did was I went to Insert Caption. Now, as you can see, it already knows we have figure 1. So if I did it again, it's going to go to figure 2. I chose figure, and I just placed down that line. Now, the one thing that was a little inconvenient is it turned the entire caption italicized, and we don't really want that. So you could simply highlight the part that's the caption, unitalicize it. You could add the period here after the figure number, and there you have it. Now, for instance, let me do a different one. Let's say you had another caption. It was called alternate space-time curvature. Now, I'm not actually going to bring in another image, but just to show you. Now, it might be a little simpler, and this is just a kind of small habit to get used to, but if you had your caption ready, you've already typed it out, I would put the figure caption when you first insert it on the first line. So I'd go insert figure caption, figure 2, okay. And now if I don't know if this will work, let me test it. I'm mistaken. In fact, it would still turn the entire thing italic. So all you'd have to do then is, again, highlight the relevant portion, unitalicize it. So these are minor details, but you can quickly figure out how best to execute these functions. Now the other thing that I wanted to mention, and you might have noticed this, and I'll go back to it. If you insert caption, you can either do sequential caption numbering. So in other words, you'd have the entire document consist of a continuous list of figures. So it'd be figure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 throughout every chapter. Chapter 5 might have figures 10 through 15. Chapter 6 might have figures 16 through 21. That would be sequential numbering throughout the entire document. The other option is to have the numbering set by chapter. So in other words, and this is very common for many fields, you'd like to have chapter, if the figure appears in chapter 1, it's going to be labeled 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. Then when you get to chapter 2, it starts over at 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, so on. When you go to the insert caption function, you can then click on numbering, and you can select that option, include chapter number. Now, one of the reasons I've been kind of particular about the chapter headings, the level 1 chapter headings, for instance, chapter 1 introduction, and that I suggest you leave them as they are, is that they are currently set up properly to achieve this, to allow you to do the numbering based on chapters. If you did something radically different, if you made a big change to your document, or even if you're using an older version of the template, which doesn't include this function, this will not work. If you try to do this, it might not look right. It might show up as 0.1 instead of the appropriate chapter number. But in our case, since we're using the most up-to-date version of the template, which is accounted for this, you can now choose to use the chapter numbers for your captions if you would like. You can do it. You don't have to. It's your choice. So let's say I want to do it. Include chapter number. Now, as you see, even just choosing that option changed all of them automatically. So now, remember, we're in chapter 2, so this is figure 2.1, and then this would have been my hypothetical figure 2.2, and the same thing would continue. If I add another one, it would be figure 2.3. If I go to chapter 3, you can see the sample one that we had is already 3.1. So it restarts at each chapter, and it indicates which chapter the figure belongs to. Now, as with the table of contents, if you go to the list of figures, it's a separate field. It's not the same as the table of contents. You have to click on it separately. And you can either right-click, or you can do F9 for the shortcut. You can right-click and do Update Field. And again, it will update automatically. It'll take what we already have put in there, enter them automatically. So now we have figure 2.1, we have its caption. Figure 2.2, we have its caption. And of course, these other ones were sample ones that were from the original template. And again, similar to what we did before, you can hold Control and then click, and it'll go directly to that part of the text. Now let's quickly do one example of a table, and it follows much the same principle, but just to show you how you can make it look the way we want it to look, namely with, I see what I did here. Namely with the split caption, table number, and then the caption italics in the line below. Okay, so here we have a sample table. Now you could copy and paste a table from the template if you want to use that as a model. If you've never really played around with Microsoft Word much, you can also go to Insert, and right here there's a Table tab, and if you click on it, you can choose the size of your table. You can then do all kinds of different styles for your table. I mean, the one here is a very fundamental, straightforward style with, lines around every box, with very simple formatting. You can do color-based formatting. You can do all kinds of different things depending on how you want your tables to look. But I would say in general, if you're creating all of your tables from scratch, they should be consistent throughout the text. So again, here we have this sample, and obviously this is a joke because I took sample information that has nothing to do with general relativity. But let's say this is our intended caption for the table. The general principle is much the same as what we did before for figures. Go to References, go to Insert Caption. Now we simply choose Table. And again, you choose whether you want them to be numbered sequentially or numbered by chapter. Here I'll do by chapter just so it matches what we did with the figures. And notice it did something funny. If it does this, it has a hyphen. That option is also under numbering. I would personally do the same that you do for figures. So if you do period for the figures, I would do a period for the tables as well. So now it'll be 2.1, table 2.1. Now, you can make it look right this way, well, just by moving your intended caption where you want it to be. And we actually want to invert the italics here. So I'm going to undo the italics on the table number. I'm going to place italics on the caption itself. So again, it matches our intended style, again, which comes from APA. Now this looks great, right? You have the table number. It's, as you can see, it's a field. You can hover over it and you can tell Microsoft Word is tracking the numbering. That's great. The problem is, if you do it just like I did it now, Microsoft Word will not pick up the caption. It will not realize that the caption is part of table number 2.1. So if you go back to the list of tables and you update, here's what you'd see. It'll say 2.1. It knows that there's a table there, but it doesn't know the caption that's associated with it. If you find that to be the case, and it probably has to do with the fact that you split it onto a second line, the trick is this. You can bring it up to the same line. If I updated the list of tables now, it would appear. So the fact that it's on the same line helps identify that it's part of that caption. Now to put it on the second line without eliminating it from the list of tables, what you do is a very simple trick. You can do Shift, you hold down the Shift key, and then press Enter. So it's basically it's the same as Enter. In other words, it puts it to the next line, but it allows it to consider it as being closely related or kind of part of an extension of the previous line of text. So again, all I did was I brought my caption onto the same line as the table number that we inserted, and I simply held down Shift and press Enter. And now it split it. Everything looks beautiful. It looks the same. I'll just make this italics. But now if you go to the list of tables and you update it, it will in fact include the table caption. Here you'd have to do update entire table so that it actually captures that addition. And there you have it. Now you can see there's one funny thing with the spacing, which is different. Again, make sure you're consistent, but you can do it any which way. So for instance here, you could actually bring it right back against the number and then do this, and there wouldn't be quite as much of a space. Or you could have one space and then Shift Enter. It doesn't matter, but as long as it's consistent throughout the text, it will look consistent in your list of tables with each of your tables. Those are probably the main functions that I want you to kind of be aware of. How to do heading formatting and how to do figure and table formatting. One other subtle point that I'll make about tables, and I'll show you the example. There's an example within the template text. If you have a case where, let's say, your table is split across two pages or more pages if it's a very long table. Now, if this were a figure, I would say please adjust it so that that doesn't happen. In other words, the figure should always appear on the same page as its caption. There should be no split in a figure. That really doesn't apply. In some cases, though, it might be necessary to split a table. Oftentimes, it's still true that you could simply rearrange the text. For instance, if I had text up here, maybe I could put the table up there and then put that text later, and maybe that would overcome the problem. But let's say you get to the final version, you still have a split, and you feel like that's the most logical way to achieve that, to make things look right. It is possible to have a split table, and if you do it, you'd want it to look like this. This is the sample from chapter 3 of the template. So we have table 3.1, and let's see, there's a problem. Let me fix it. Yeah, let's say it looks like this. It's going to split right down the middle, more or less. What you do is you have the same caption as normal on the first page, and on the second page, you manually type in a similar caption so that you can tell that it's part of the same table. In other words, it's not a new table, it's not a mistake, and it helps the reader kind of flow from one page to the next. And again, you have to do it manually, because if you actually inserted a caption, it would number it differently. It would number it as 3.2, and we don't want it to do that. And we don't want to keep track of it either, because we don't want to pick this caption up for the list of tables. So again, you simply would split the table, and you actually have to split the table. I'll show you how to do that in a moment. And then you'd move the bottom half down, and you'd add this manually typed caption. So I'd type in table 3.1, and then for the caption itself, I'd simply put continued or CONT dot as shorthand. And that lets the reader know that's simply continuation of the previous page's table. Now, the one problem with doing this is that if you then move anything, it doesn't work anymore, right? Now that I've spaced it down, suddenly this doesn't fit. There's a problem again. So this is really only something you would do if you come to the last version, the last kind of read through of your document, and you feel that there's a table that needs to be split for some reason. Otherwise, I would usually recommend simply adjusting the relationship of text and images so that each table is on the same page as its caption and is not split. If you do have to split a table, if you're not familiar with this, normally in Microsoft Word now, if you click on any part of a table, it brings up the table tools. So let's say I wanted to split from this point forward, this last two lines here. I think it's under design, or no, it's under layout of a table. You can split cells or you can split table. Here we'd want to split the table. And there you have it. It actually split just the portion I highlighted, so it's now separate, and you can type text in between. Oops. You can move it around as you see fit onto the next page and then add that caption. But again, that's a rare case, although it's something that could come up for you. A couple other things to keep in mind. If you ever have problems with pagination, it's set up properly from the get-go with the Word template that we have, so you don't have to worry about it in most cases. But let's say you accidentally delete something, you eliminate the page numbers from one section. Notice that if you click on the page numbers, there are different sections of text. We have section 2, and now we're in section 3. I won't dwell on this right now because it's not relevant for a lot of students, but I'll just say usually if something disappears and it's gone for a huge chunk of the document, it means that at least one section, either the page numbers were deleted altogether, or something connected to the page numbers was deleted, something along those lines. So if you have that kind of problem, it usually has to do with section breaks and section numbers. If you get confused about that, you can always, of course, ask me, as you can for any of these issues. One other issue I'll mention, it comes up for some students. You may want to have an appendix, and there are two sample appendices in the template. So we have Appendix A and Appendix B. Appendix A is just a plain old sample. Appendix B is an example of a large table that needs to be landscaped, and so you maybe put it in the appendix because it wasn't going to be convenient to put it in the text. Now, the first thing I'll mention is if you need to do this, it's worth using this page in the template as a model. You can even copy this. Now you'll notice the trickiest part about this is actually the page number. The page number is rotated so that if you printed out this text, the page numbers would line up. So let me make that clear. So for instance, here you have page 12. If this was rotated 90 degrees counterclockwise, and then it was put on top of or beneath that previous page, the page numbers would then line up. And that's ideal if, for instance, you were printing this as a book or if you're getting a bound copy. In other words, the page numbers would be continuous. The figure itself or the image itself or the table itself would be the thing that would be turned sideways for spacing purposes. The way that we did this was simply to create a text box. You can create a text box. You can then type in a number, and then you can rotate the text. I believe the setting is either under rotate or it's under text direction. I can't remember which one we used. Some combination of those. I think we actually rotated the box itself. Now, in normal cases, you can actually copy our sample number, which is 15, and you can paste it into your own document. So even if it's not page 15 for you, and it probably wouldn't be, you can then paste it, and usually it appears on the same portion of the page, and then you type in